Athlete of the Year, probably because she was hurt and probably because she was last year's Time Magazine Athlete of the Year. Well, I'm here to tell you they decided to go with another WNBA star. That was A'ja Wilson. Now, A'ja Wilson, to me, shouldn't have got it, bro. She got help from the WNBA referees throughout the whole entire season. Everybody act like they forget that. I mean, they hella cheated against the Fever, pretty much 5% of the growth of the WNBA, pretty much saying that they was going on an upward trajectory before Caitlin Clark got there. Now, here's my answer to it all. I've been following this thing for the last like 2.5 years, almost 3 years, and the WNBA died when Caitlin Clark genre took a hit this past season. Caitlin Clark only playing 13 games ultimately killed the WNBA viewership. Look at everybody's numbers. Like the numbers don't lie. Had Caitlin Clark balled out and had a spectacular season and the Indiana Fever won the WNBA.
So let's talk about energy for a second, because this isn't just some casual observation we're dealing with here. This is raw frustration that's been building in real time among millions of WNBA fans who've been tracking every stat, watching every game, and suddenly having this collective realization hit them. No matter what Caitlin Clark accomplishes on that court, no matter how many records she shatters or how many arenas she fills, there's a segment of the WNBA establishment that will never give her the credit she deserves. Time magazine just named A'ja Wilson their 2024 Athlete of the Year. And look, Wilson's accomplishments are legitimate. 3rd MVP award, 2nd Olympic gold medal, tournament MVP in Paris. Nobody's disputing those achievements. But buried deep in that article was a statement that has the entire basketball world divided right now. A claim that Caitlin Clark was responsible for only 5% of the WNBA's growth. 5%. Many of you have been saying for months that something doesn't add up with how the league talks about Clark's impact. You were onto something, because when you actually look at the numbers, when you filter out the noise and examine what happened during Clark's injury absence, the real story reveals itself. And it's nothing like what Time magazine published. If you believe the story behind the story matters, if you think actual data should matter more than narratives, hit that like button right now. It tells us we're on the right track with this investigation. Here's what actually went down. Time magazine published their feature on December 11th, 2024. The article praised Wilson's historic season, which, again, completely deserved. But then came this line that's causing all the controversy. The piece claimed Clark was almost singularly responsible for salvaging the league before pushing back against that narrative. Wilson's response: that the league was already on an upward trajectory, that Clark's impact represented just a small fraction of overall growth. Let's be crystal clear about what's at stake here. We're not just talking about who gets credit or whose feelings get hurt. This is about the WNBA's future. The league just signed a media rights deal worth $2.2 billion over 11 years. That's triple what they were getting before charter flights were approved for the first time in league history. Player salaries are set to increase dramatically. These aren't just nice perks. These are fundamental changes that transform the WNBA from a side project into a legitimate professional sports league. And here's the uncomfortable question nobody at Time magazine wanted to ask. Would any of those deals have happened without Caitlin Clark's impact on viewership? Would media companies have tripled their investment based on the league's pre-2024 trajectory? Because reading between the lines of those network negotiations, the answer seems pretty clear. Now, Wilson's camp will point to the fact that during Clark's injury absence, ESPN reported that viewership only dropped 5 to 6%. See? The league maintained its growth even without Clark. Case closed. Right? Not exactly. Because what they're not telling you is how ESPN arrived at those numbers. And this is where things get really interesting. When Caitlin Clark went down with her knee injury in July 2024, the WNBA's viewership didn't experience a minor dip. It absolutely collapsed. Indiana Fever games that were averaging 1.78 million viewers with Clark on the court suddenly dropped to 394,000 viewers when she was injured. That's not a 5% decline. That's a 48% drop in traditional television viewership. Nearly half the audience just vanished. So how did ESPN claim only a 5 to 6% decrease? Here's the trick. They changed their methodology mid-season. ESPN started including streaming numbers that they had never previously counted in their official metrics. Digital platforms, international streams, delayed viewings. Suddenly, all these additional data points got added to soften the blow and make the decline look less catastrophic. Now, is it technically accurate to say viewership only dropped 5 to 6% if you completely change how you measure viewership? Sure. In the same way, it's technically accurate to say a stock didn't crash if you start counting potential future investors in your market cap calculation. The methodology shift tells you everything you need to know about how desperate they were to downplay Clark's impact. Multiple sources in sports media have been whispering about this for months. The pressure from certain players and league officials to minimize Clark's influence, to protect the narrative that the WNBA's growth was organic and building for years before she arrived. And look, that's partially true. The foundation matters. Players like Wilson, Breanna Stewart, Sue Bird, they absolutely built something important over the past 2 decades, but you can acknowledge that foundation while also being honest about what happened in 2024. Those are not mutually exclusive concepts. The league had been growing at maybe 3 to 5% annually for years. Respectable, steady growth. Then Clark arrived and viewership increased by over 170% in games she played. That's not incremental growth. That's a complete transformation. Connecting the dots reveals something fascinating about the timing of Wilson's Time magazine feature. This wasn't just a random profile celebrating her accomplishments. The framing, the specific language about Clark, salvaging the league, the emphasis on the 5% statistic, it reads like a coordinated response to months of Clark dominating WNBA headlines. Like certain players wanted to reclaim the narrative before it got completely away from them. And here's what makes this particularly awkward. A'ja Wilson herself has benefited enormously from Caitlin Clark's impact. Wilson's social media following increased 42% during the 2024 season. Her endorsement portfolio expanded. Her jersey sales jumped significantly. The Aces' playoff games drew higher ratings than previous championship runs, largely because casual fans who discovered the league through Clark stuck around for the postseason. Wilson is literally earning more money and reaching more fans because of the audience Clark brought to the WNBA. And yet the Time magazine piece positions her as defending the league against Clark's influence, as if that influence is a threat, rather than the opportunity that's elevating everyone's profile. Let me ask you something in the comments right now. Have you noticed how the narrative around Caitlin Clark shifts, depending on who's telling the story? Because I want to hear your perspective on whether this feels like a coordinated effort to minimize her impact, or if I'm reading too much into it. Drop your thoughts below, because this conversation is just getting started. Now let's dig into the international numbers, because this is where the 5% claim completely falls apart. WNBA League Pass subscriptions from outside the United States increased by 63% during Clark's rookie season. Merchandise sales in international markets jumped 89%. The league's social media engagement from non-UDSC accounts grew by over 200% in some demographics. Those numbers aren't because of gradual historical growth. They're specifically because Caitlin Clark became a global sports phenomenon and international fans wanted to watch her play. When she went down with the knee injury, those international metrics dropped by an average of 56% almost immediately. The WNBA's first real moment of global mainstream relevance evaporated when Clark left the court. You were onto something when you noticed how certain media outlets started treating Clark differently as her impact became undeniable. The tone shifted from celebration to almost resentment in some corners, like her success was somehow threatening to the established order. Wilson's statement in Time magazine about not losing the recipe reveals a fundamental tension that's been building within the WNBA's player base. There's a faction of established stars who view Clark's popularity as a threat to the narrative they've built about the league's growth trajectory. They want credit for building the foundation, which they absolutely deserve, but they also want credit for the explosive 2024 growth that objectively happened because of one player's catalyst effect. You can't have both things. The foundation matters tremendously. The catalyst matters tremendously. But they're different contributions that deserve different recognition. Acknowledging Clark's unprecedented impact doesn't erase A'ja Wilson's 3 MVPs or her Olympic gold medals. It just accurately describes what happened when a generational talent entered the league and brought millions of new fans with her. Let's talk about that media rights deal again, because the timing tells you everything. The WNBA and its broadcast partners announced negotiations for a new media deal in early 2024. But those negotiations accelerated dramatically after Clark's first few months in the league. Sources close to the discussions have indicated that network executives specifically cited Clark's ability to draw casual viewers when justifying increased investment to their boards. Disney, NBC, Amazon, these companies didn't triple their financial commitment because of historical appreciation for the WNBA or respect for what previous generations built. They did it because Clark proved something that had never been proven before, that the league could draw mainstream casual viewers in massive numbers, that it could compete for primetime attention against other sports programming. We're getting into rumor territory here, but multiple sources suggest that certain veteran players pushed back hard against the narrative that Clark was responsible for the league's newfound visibility. They wanted the media deal credited to collective effort, to the foundation they'd built, to anything other than one rookie's impact. And to some extent, they succeeded in shaping that narrative through sympathetic media coverage. But here's what the numbers actually show. Fever games without Clark averaged 394,000 viewers, respectable by historical WNBA standards, better than what many teams typically draw, but nowhere near the 1.78 million average that Fever games pulled when Clark was healthy and playing. The league didn't maintain Clark's growth during her absence like some people want to claim. They reverted almost immediately to their pre-Clark baseline.
The most popular women's basketball player in the world. Now let's move on to the story of the hour. The story of the hour is, as soon as you type Caitlin Clark name on X, find this: fan defends Caitlin Clark passes shooting. Ben Shea said it this. So this is the article that came out with A'ja Wilson being on the cover. You know, so this was it, and this is it. And I don't really care for A'ja Wilson, guys. I just got to be honest. Can't shake my resume. It was more so let's not lose the recipe. Let's not lose the history. It was erased for a minute, and I don't like that because we have tons of women that have been through this, blah, 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 blah. And it goes on to say, the 2025 WNBA campaign provided a measure of vindication of many players, despite Caitlin Clark missing most of the season with an injury. Something Wilson, to be clear, did not cheer viewership for both the.
What makes Wilson's Time magazine comments particularly frustrating is that she could have taken the high road here. She could have said something like, Caitlin's impact has been incredible for all of us, and I'm grateful more people are watching the league I've worked so hard to elevate. Instead, the piece frames her as defending the WNBA against the Clark narrative, as if those two things are in opposition. They're not in opposition. Clark's success and Wilson's success can absolutely coexist. The league can honor its history while celebrating its present. But that requires established players to acknowledge reality rather than minimizing the most impactful rookie season in WNBA history. And here's the broader implication that should concern every WNBA fan. If the league's established stars continue downplaying Clark's influence, If they keep pushing this narrative that she's just one small piece of a larger puzzle, what happens when negotiations for the next media deal come around? What happens when network executives look at the data and realize the league's biggest draw is being marginalized by her own peers? The WNBA is at a crossroads right now. The 2025 season, assuming there's no lockout from CBA negotiations, will force this conversation again. Clark will return from her knee injury, hopefully at full strength. The Fever will once again be the league's biggest draw, and players like Wilson will have to decide whether they're going to embrace the rising tide that lifts all boats, or continue positioning themselves as guardians of a history that Clark never tried to erase. The Time magazine article could have celebrated two great players having historic seasons in the same year, could have positioned them as complementary stars driving the league forward together. Instead, it created a false binary, a narrative that one player's success somehow diminishes another's legacy. So here's the real question, and I want you to think about this carefully. Was Aja Wilson wrong to frame Caitlin Clark's impact as only 5% of the WNBA's growth? Or is there a legitimate argument that the media overcredited Clark while ignoring the foundation that Wilson and others built over decades? Because this conversation isn't going away. The 2025 season is going to force this discussion again. How the league's established stars treat Clark when she returns, how they acknowledge or don't acknowledge her impact. That's going to define whether the WNBA continues its growth trajectory into mainstream relevance or reverts to the pre-2024 baseline that nobody wants. If you want more WNBA analysis that actually examines the data, instead of just pushing comfortable narratives, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're going to keep following this story as it develops. And trust me, there's a lot more coming. Next up, we're breaking down exactly what happened behind closed doors during those media rights negotiations and why certain players tried to stop the league from acknowledging Clark's role. You're not going to want to miss that. Let me know in the comments what you think about the 5% claim. Do the numbers support it, or is this the biggest statistical manipulation in WNBA history? I'll see you in the next one.